the absolute most effective, deeply insidious method the current financial system uses to keep you permanently docile, completely unleveraged, and entirely reliant on a corporate employer is not the taxation of your income or the fluctuations of the macroeconomic cycle. It is the weaponized, highly psychological programming that convinces you to voluntarily surrender your highly liquid seed capital in exchange for rapidly depreciating status symbols. Right at this very moment, millions upon millions of people in this country are hemorrhaging their future wealth, working exhausting, soul-crushing jobs they deeply hate just to finance a lifestyle of incremental luxury upgrades that provides absolutely zero asymmetric return. They are blindly following a catastrophic financial script that equates the accumulation of expensive consumer goods with actual success, completely missing the undeniable mathematical reality that every single dollar spent on a depreciating asset is a dollar permanently removed from your ability to build a technological or financial monopoly. They are competing in a rigged, pathetic game of mimetic desire where the only guaranteed prize is becoming completely illiquid, completely unable to take asymmetric risks, and entirely dependent on the next fragile paycheck to survive. And if you want to understand exactly why the middle class is mathematically doomed to perpetual anxiety and wage slavery, you only need to look at what they are actively spending their disposable income on. But if you want to receive the unfiltered, contrarian truths that polite society, the corporate marketing machine, and the traditional financial entertainment industry are desperately trying to hide from you behind a veil of fake, mass-produced luxury, subscribe to the channel right now, because what comes next will absolutely shatter everything you have been taught about consumerism and wealth, showing you exactly how the corporations you blindly enrich are actively using your deep biological need for social validation to mine your future for their own quarterly profit. The trap is so perfectly disguised as the ultimate reward for your hard work that people do not even see the iron bars of their own deeply expensive cage. They genuinely believe that upgrading to the newest $1,000 smartphone every 12 months, buying designer clothing with visible logos, and leasing vehicles they cannot actually afford is a reflection of their personal value. But it is actually the ultimate form of systemic conformity and modern financial surrender, a deeply cynical mechanism designed by the elites to strip you of your capital during your most productive years before you even understand the supreme power of compounding interest and technological leverage. You are buying into the middle-class script that conditions you through intense peer pressure to chase the hollow status of impressing people you do not even like. Instead of aggressively building actual asymmetric wealth in the background, you are being explicitly taught to play it incredibly safe in your career so you can afford to be incredibly reckless in your consumption. But the brutal, contrarian truth is that spending your capital to look rich is a philosophy exclusively for losers and the mathematically illiterate. The herd is being led to the financial slaughterhouse by an entire industry of marketers who operate exactly like a pacifying religion, selling an illusion of historical prestige while saddling you with massive, unrecoverable opportunity costs. I know this intimately, not from reading conventional outdated economics textbooks, but because I saw this exact toxic behavioral pattern firsthand when I was navigating the early hyper-competitive days of my career, trapped in a prestigious Manhattan law firm surrounded by brilliant but profoundly misguided people who were entirely terrified of looking average. I watched highly educated individuals completely destroy their own financial leverage by taking their massive annual bonuses and immediately spending them on completely useless European sports cars, incredibly overpriced real estate, and ridiculous luxury watches simply to cope with the deep misery of their 80-hour work weeks. They were engaging in a toxic war of attrition with their own bank accounts just to feel a fleeting sense of superiority. I realized that if I had followed the herd's manual, if I had focused my energy on incrementally upgrading my lifestyle and buying depreciating status symbols instead of aggressively allocating my capital towards the future, I would have never had the liquidity or the psychological freedom to build PayPal. I would have been running a frantic, exhausting race I should not even be in, fighting a pathetic battle where the winner just gets a nicer car and zero actual power to change the world, until I realized that the only way to build true generational wealth is to step completely, unapologetically outside the matrix of conventional consumer wisdom, to completely stop spending money on things designed to impress the herd and start deploying that highly valuable capital into asymmetric technological bets. And before we continue to mathematically dismantle this intellectually bankrupt consumer system point by point, tell me right here in the comments which state you are watching from. I want to know exactly how many independent, contrarian thinkers are in this fight with me today, who possess the intellectual courage to understand that liquid capital is a weapon and not a toy for consumption. Write down your city right now and let us form a relentless community of people who truly want to break the mold and achieve absolute financial sovereignty through superior capital allocation. Now, I want you to meticulously consider the cold, ruthless logic behind the first massive, fundamentally catastrophic error you are currently making, which is the deeply irrational decision to finance a completely unnecessary luxury vehicle simply to appease your social anxiety and satisfy the mimetic desire of your financially illiterate peer group. The herd willingly falls into this trap because human beings are biologically terrified of being perceived as unsuccessful. They entirely fail to understand that an automobile is nothing more than a highly inefficient, rapidly depreciating piece of industrial machinery, so they blindly take their highly valuable present-day liquid dollars and hand them to an automotive dealership to pay for an asset that literally loses 10% of its value the exact second the tires touch the public street, and the immediate, highly visible consequence of this pathetic herd behavior is that you completely evaporate your liquid capital and your monthly cash flow. You trap your intellectual and financial wealth entirely inside the suffocating metal box of a depreciating liability, rendering you entirely unable to take the asymmetric risks required to build real wealth because you literally have absolutely no capital left to invest, and you are saddled with a massive monthly payment that forces you to endure the daily humiliation of a corporate job you despise. Let us aggressively look at the brutal, undeniable mathematics of conventional consumer wisdom right here and right now. If you are 35 years old and you follow the terrified herd by taking out an $80,000 auto loan at a 7% fixed interest rate for a generic luxury SUV simply because your suburban neighbors just bought one, you are completely, irreversibly destroying your financial trajectory before your true wealth building years even begin. You are violently bleeding $1,500 a month in pure opportunity cost and depreciation, and if you simply stretch that toxic financial behavior out over the 6-year lifespan of that completely predatory loan, you will have paid nearly $100,000 for a machine that is now worth less than $30,000. This transforms into an incredibly massive, catastrophic loss of capital, evaporating hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential compounding interest permanently into a broken, unrewarding consumer system that literally hates your financial independence. You are proudly paying a massive premium for a piece of metal that guarantees you will never be able to quit your job to start a completely automated software company. This is the real, measurable, absolutely devastating cost of your desperate need for emotional validation and societal approval. You foolishly traded exponential growth and sovereign leverage for a tiny reduction in social anxiety and a heated leather seat. You are literally financing your own obsolescence and guaranteeing your absolute reliance on the corporate hierarchy. Now, look at the completely opposite reality. Look closely at the cold, calculating, contrarian path. If you step completely out of the consumer matrix today, absolutely refuse to participate in the luxury vehicle illusion, completely avoid that $80,000 of toxic, wealth-destroying debt, permanently swallow your ego, go buy a reliable $5,000 used vehicle in cash, retain your precious mobility and capital, and aggressively allocate that exact same massive monthly payment amount towards an asymmetric advantage or a high-yield broad market index fund, investing that $1,500 a month into the S&P 500 with a historical average return of 10%, in 20 years you will not just have a meaningless, rusting piece of scrap metal sitting in a suburban driveway. You will have over $1,100,000 in highly liquid compounding assets. The difference is an absolute fortune of pure, unadulterated freedom. The difference between having all your future labor hopelessly trapped by a massive auto loan and having a massive liquid war chest ready to deploy into the actual technological frontier when the next market crash occurs. I saw this exact, highly predictable scenario play out perfectly with countless contrarian founders who possessed the sheer intellectual courage to completely ignore the consumer cartel. They drove battered 15-year-old sedans entirely without shame, completely ignored the collective hysterical outrage of their conservative parents and brand-obsessed peers, retained their massive liquid capital and their monthly cash flow, and utilized that precise capital to build software monopolies that generated millions of dollars in highly profitable revenue before they even reached their late 20s, achieving a level of total sovereignty that their debt-burdened, vehicle-obsessed classmates will never, ever see in their entire miserable lifetimes. Contrarian wealth builders absolutely refuse to finance depreciating luxury goods because they deeply understand a fundamental law of the modern macroeconomic universe, that true wealth is exactly the money you do not spend. It is the invisible, highly potent liquid capital that allows for an asymmetric leap from 0 to 1 achieved by maximizing highly scalable technological leverage. Whereas the herd lives paycheck to paycheck, terrified of the concept of looking poor, and aggressively takes on massive, unforgivable consumer loans to buy outdated technology wrapped in shiny paint, because they completely buy into the moral superiority myth of the upper middle class. Deeply convinced that holding the keys to a German sports car will somehow miraculously protect them from the harsh, highly efficient algorithms of a rapidly changing global digital economy. The mathematical result of these two dramatically diverging paths after 20 years is staggering and completely irrefutable. The first group, the independent thinkers who weaponized their capital, commands massive liquid portfolios, extreme operational flexibility, and total autonomy over their time and digital investments, while the second group is hopelessly cash poor, sitting proudly in traffic inside a depreciating asset, desperately trying to justify their massive monthly payment to a boss they hate. Completely unable to start a business or pivot their career without facing absolute financial ruin, the difference is literally over $1 million in net worth and an entire lifetime of infinite optionality versus an entire lifetime of fragile, totally obsolete anxiety. And the systemic failure of human capital allocation goes even deeper when we examine the second massive, mathematically catastrophic error, which is the total inability to resist the microtransactions of modern convenience. And the deeply toxic subscription lifestyle that acts as 1,000 invisible financial cuts, bleeding your highly liquid capital to absolute zero. The herd genuinely, desperately believes that paying an enormous premium for food delivery apps, carrying 12 different digital entertainment subscriptions, and mindlessly tapping their smartphones to outsource every minor physical inconvenience of their daily existence is the ultimate sign of modern success. They are completely blinded by the sunk cost of their own laziness, entirely failing to comprehend that the corporate technology monopolies they so deeply worship have perfectly weaponized algorithms to siphon their wealth a few dollars at a time, preventing them from ever accumulating the critical mass of capital required to actually buy their freedom. The conventional middle-class budget is no longer a tool for wealth creation. It is a highly porous bucket leaking liquid fuel directly into the accounts of billionaires, and the people fighting for a 3% annual promotion are literally spending their raises on digital convenience that makes them fundamentally weaker. Let us aggressively do the brutal, unforgiving math on this widely accepted middle-class subscription illusion right now. If you are 30 years old and you voluntarily choose to hemorrhage $40 a day on completely unnecessary conveniences, paying exorbitant fees for someone else to deliver your lukewarm coffee and your generic corporate lunch, while passively funding a suite of digital entertainment subscriptions you barely even watch simply to sedate yourself after a meaningless day at the office. You are instantly destroying your leverage. You are violently bleeding $1,200 every single month, and if you look at the projection for the next 20 years, you will have traded your most vital seed capital for absolutely nothing of tangible value. You will have evaporated over $800,000 in compounding interest directly into a broken corporate system that actively engineers your dopamine receptors to keep you poor and docile. This is the real, quantifiable cost of following the herd into the convenience trap. You are trading your prime years of innovation and true capital deployment for a false sense of effortless living, leaving yourself entirely vulnerable to total obsolescence when the macroeconomic cycle turns against you. Now, look at the cold, calculating, highly asymmetric contrarian path. If you step completely out of the convenience matrix today, absolutely refuse to participate in this highly vulnerable consumer dynamic, voluntarily leave the illusion of effortless luxury, ruthlessly audit every single microtransaction, delete the delivery applications, cancel the streaming services that are actively rotting your neuroplasticity, and aggressively allocate your newly retained massive cash flow towards a high-yield broad market index fund. Investing that exact same $1,200 a month of your preserved capital into the S&P 500 with a historical average return of 10%, in exactly 20 years, you will not just have a meaningless history of delivered meals and binge-watched television, you will have over $850,000 in highly liquid compounding assets. Plus the complete ownership of your own attention span and psychological discipline. The difference is an absolute fortune of pure, unadulterated freedom. The difference between being a fragile, terrified consumer begging for digital dopamine and being an anti-fragile, highly liquid capital allocator who completely dictates their own reality. I saw this exact, highly predictable scenario play out perfectly with brilliant independent thinkers who possessed the intellectual courage to completely ignore the social pressure to consume convenience. They aggressively cooked their own cheap meals, completely ignored the collective outrage of their digitally addicted peers, retained their absolute autonomy over their attention, and used that precise capital and intense focus to bootstrap digital companies that generated millions of dollars in highly profitable revenue before they even reached their 40s, achieving a level of sovereignty that their exhausted, digitally sedated, heavily stressed classmates will never see in their entire miserable lifetimes. Contrarian wealth builders absolutely refuse to trade their seed capital for a fleeting moment of convenience because they deeply understand that your capital is fundamentally your ammunition, and trying to build wealth while bleeding microtransactions is exactly like trying to fill a bathtub with the drain completely open. It is a mathematical impossibility. Whereas the herd lives paycheck to paycheck, terrified of minor physical effort, and aggressively spends their remaining dollars on sedation while actual inflation destroys their purchasing power because they completely buy into the moral superiority myth of modern convenience, deeply convinced that avoiding a trip to the grocery store will somehow protect them from the harsh, highly efficient algorithms of a rapidly changing global digital economy. The mathematical result of these two diverging paths after 20 years is staggering and completely irrefutable. The first group, the independent, highly disciplined thinkers, commands massive liquid portfolios, extreme operational flexibility, and total autonomy over their time. While the second group is hopelessly cash poor, sitting proudly in an apartment filled with empty takeout containers, but completely unable to survive a sudden corporate restructuring without facing absolute financial ruin. The difference is literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in net worth and an entire lifetime of infinite optionality versus an entire lifetime of fragile, illiquid anxiety. And let me present you with a completely different, highly contrarian, and perhaps the most devastating paradigm for the third catastrophic consumer error, which is the panic-driven, fundamentally irrational decision to blow massive amounts of capital on the experience economy, the deeply toxic illusion that spending $10,000 a year on heavily curated, highly photographed luxury vacations is a valid substitute for actually building a life you do not need to constantly escape from. The herd genuinely believes that if their daily corporate existence is deeply miserable, the logical solution is to buy a 2-week premium escape to a tropical resort to numb the pain, completely failing to realize that taking their most powerful wealth-building tool and giving it to an airline or a luxury hotel chain just to post pictures for people they secretly despise is the ultimate sunk cost fallacy. It is exactly like buying an incredibly expensive painkiller for a broken leg instead of actually resetting the bone. Following this traditional, social media-sanctioned path of endless experiential consumption is exactly like fighting a brutal war of attrition against mathematics itself, where you are absolutely guaranteed to lose your purchasing power and your long-term sanity. Let us look at the devastating, completely undeniable mathematics of playing it safe and misunderstanding macroeconomic consumer shifts. If you are 35 years old and you decide to take $10,000 of your highly valuable liquid capital every single year to buy an elite, heavily photographed vacation simply because your coworkers are doing the exact same thing, you are violently bleeding your future purchasing power every single year. You are taking highly valuable dollars and giving them to an institution that is selling you a temporary illusion. And if you stretch out that brutal spending habit over 20 years, this transforms into a massive, catastrophic loss of capital, evaporating over $600,000 in pure opportunity cost and compounding interest directly into a broken, visually obsessed consumer cartel. This is the real, horrifying cost of your total failure of imagination and your blind, obedient trust in conventional, intellectually lazy, societal advice. You are literally paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to temporarily forget how miserable your career actually is. Now, if you step out of the matrix today, completely stop feeding the experiential consumer bubble, aggressively educate yourself on asymmetric risk and generative capital allocation, permanently accept that building true wealth requires a decade of intense, uncompromising focus with zero luxury escapes, and invest that exact same $10,000 a year into high-conviction digital assets, disruptive technologies, or the S&P 500 with a potential historical return of 10%, in 20 years you will have over $600,000 in highly liquid capital, while the original luxury vacations you foolishly bought have completely faded from your memory. The difference is not just financial, the difference is total, irreversible liberation from the state, the consumer cartel, and the corporate machine that makes you want to escape in the first place. The people who actually win in this country, the contrarians who dictate the future of human progress, do not ever wait for a luxury resort to validate their existence with a temporary hit of dopamine. They understand that expensive escapism is a tax on the deeply unfulfilled. They take extreme ownership. They completely bypass the consumer hierarchy, and they build absolute monopolies of one by weaponizing their capital to build a daily reality that is infinitely better than any vacation the middle class could ever possibly finance. Contrarian wealth builders violently seek exponential returns and utilize technological leverage because they deeply understand that trying to build wealth by competing with everyone else in a high-consumption, high-escapism paradigm is a mathematical guarantee of achieving only average, deeply mediocre results. The herd lives paycheck to paycheck and hopes that their temporary luxury experiences will protect them psychologically because they completely buy into the safe, experiential myth, terrified of taking a single intelligent risk in the real marketplace. The result after 20 years is completely binary. The first group commands vast fortunes, total autonomy, and true power by using capital to build their own empires. The second group is drowning in the system, completely reliant on a broken corporate ladder, proudly holding a smartphone full of vacation photos, but possessing absolutely zero liquid wealth and zero actual market leverage. The difference is generational wealth and millions of dollars. So what exactly do you do from now on? How do you mathematically and philosophically escape this deeply entrenched systemic trap and weaponize your mind and capital in the age of endless consumerism? You need an immediate, ruthless, and entirely uncompromising action plan, a complete mental checklist to irreversibly break your decades of social and consumer conditioning. First, you must step entirely out of the microtransaction and luxury matrix in the next 24 hours, completely stop funding the convenience economy, halt your aggressive pursuit of experiential approval, permanently cancel every single digital subscription that does not actively generate revenue, sell the deeply overpriced car, stop liquidating your vital seed cash to appease your social anxiety, and completely stop caring entirely about what mediocre, heavily indebted losers and your conventional family members think of your contrarian, highly leveraged, smart lifestyle. Then you must aggressively find your asymmetric advantage. Take that massive, newly freed monthly cash flow and deploy your resources ruthlessly this very month into acquiring specific, highly scalable technological assets that have absolutely infinite leverage. You must master the algorithms of wealth creation instead of being the victim of the algorithms of consumption. You must stop spreading your finite capital across 50 mediocre, safe consumer purchases and concentrate all of your liquidity and intense focus on the one single contrarian investment that actually works. There are absolutely no more excuses for following the herd because the historical information asymmetry that used to heavily protect the elite institutions has been completely destroyed by the internet. The knowledge to use leverage and reject consumerism, like the wealthy billionaire class, is entirely free, but the execution requires supreme, unrelenting intellectual courage and absolute discipline. You are facing a dramatic, completely irreversible choice right now. Looking down two completely divergent macroeconomic paths, you can confidently and comfortably continue on the exact path of the deeply terrified herd, taking your precious liquid capital and handing it to consumer institutions to buy fleeting status symbols and temporary conveniences, begging middle managers and algorithms for incremental promotions because you have absolutely no cash cushion to quit, trading your finite time for depreciating fiat dollars just to afford your next delivery meal, and ultimately retiring at 65 years old with a broken body, a garage full of obsolete junk, and an entirely empty bank account, forced to compete for absolute scraps and completely reliant on a failing economic system that never, ever cared about you in the first place. Or you can wake up today, look the mathematical reality of the consumer matrix directly in the face, aggressively reject the pathetic competition of mimetic desire, stop doing exactly what everyone else is doing, embrace intelligent capital hoarding, and start building true exponential wealth. Right now, the ultimate formula for absolute financial failure is simply doing what everyone else is doing. Treating excessive consumption like a moral reward instead of a deeply flawed financial transaction, and expecting a different, exceptional result in an economy that only rewards the extraordinary allocator. The traditional consumer lifestyle pipeline is the absolute biggest, most destructive psychological and financial trap in modern human history. Heavily designed by the elites to keep the middle class completely unleveraged, deeply in debt and highly docile, and your active, conscious refusal to participate in it, your aggressive decision to hoard your capital and deploy it asymmetrically through assets instead of liabilities is your absolute greatest weapon. Time is rapidly running out to secure your financial independence before the algorithmic consumer system completely consolidates its power over the terrified, obsolete middle class. If this video finally shattered your conventional, comfortable illusions about spending and money today, if you are finally ready to step entirely out of the herd and utilize capital exactly like the elite, leave your like down below, subscribe to the channel right now, and share this with someone who desperately needs to wake up from the consumer matrix, because blindly following the crowd and financing useless conveniences and status symbols in America today is a mathematically guaranteed path to total, irreversible financial ruin. You must absolutely stop consuming. You must violently start inventing. You must weaponize the very capital that you used to throw away, and you must make the definitive, permanent leap from 0 to 1.